My husband always told me I was the only woman he'd ever love. But everything changed the night we walked into a charity gala. The moment he saw a woman across the room, the color drained from his face. His hands started shaking. And that's when I realized my marriage was built on a secret he never wanted me to discover. For a few seconds, I honestly thought he was having a heart attack. "Ethan?" He didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the woman standing near the stage. She was probably in her late 50s, wearing a navy blue gown with a silver shawl over her shoulders. She wasn't looking at us. She was talking to another couple and smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. "Ethan," I said again, grabbing his arm. "Are you okay?" He finally blinked. "We need to leave." "What?" "Right now." He turned toward the exit so suddenly that he nearly bumped into a waiter carrying champagne. I caught his sleeve. "Stop." He looked at me with panic I'd never seen before. "I'll explain later." "No." I lowered my voice. "You've never looked at anyone the way you just looked at her." His jaw tightened. "Please, Claire." That one word, please, told me everything wasn't fine. We'd been married for 4 years. In all that time, Ethan had never asked me to trust him without an explanation. Until that night. "I'm not leaving until you tell me who she is." He glanced across the ballroom again. The woman was gone. His shoulders dropped slightly. "We've already missed our chance." "Our chance for what?" He rubbed his forehead. "I made a mistake bringing you here." That wasn't an answer. The charity gala was held every spring in downtown Boston to raise money for children's hospitals. Ethan's architecture firm sponsored one of the event's largest donations every year. He'd insisted we attend. Now he was acting like he'd walked into a nightmare. For the rest of the evening, he barely spoke. He kept scanning the room, searching for the woman. Every time someone walked behind him, he flinched. I tried making conversation during dinner. He picked at his food without taking more than 2 bites. The drive home was even worse. The radio stayed off. The silence between us felt heavier than the rain tapping against the windshield. Halfway home, I couldn't take it anymore. "Who was she?" His hands tightened around the steering wheel. "It doesn't matter." "It obviously does." "No." His voice cracked. "It mattered years ago." I turned toward him. "What does that mean?" He pulled into our driveway but didn't turn off the engine. "I need you to trust me." I laughed bitterly. "That's hard to do when you're hiding something." He stared through the windshield. "I've been trying to protect you." "From what?" He closed his eyes. "From my past." That was the first time I'd ever heard him say those words. Ethan rarely talked about his childhood. He'd told me his parents died when he was young, and that he'd been raised by foster families before earning a scholarship to college. It was heartbreaking, but he'd always said he preferred looking forward instead of backward. I respected that. Until now. "What does that woman have to do with your past?" He slowly shook his head. "I'm not ready." I didn't push anymore that night. Not because I was satisfied. Because I knew he wouldn't tell me. The next morning, he left for work earlier than usual. He kissed my forehead before leaving. "I love you." Normally I'd answer without thinking. Instead, I waited until the front door closed. Then I whispered, "I hope that's true." I spent the entire day replaying the gala in my head. The fear on his face hadn't looked like guilt. It looked like grief. There was a difference. By lunchtime, curiosity had become impossible to ignore. I called my best friend, Megan. "If your husband saw someone who terrified him, what would you do?" "I'd find out who she was." "How?" She laughed. "Claire, you've worked in marketing for 10 years. You're basically a professional researcher." She wasn't wrong. That afternoon, I searched through the gala's online guest list. It took almost an hour before I found a photograph. There she was. The woman from the ballroom. Her name was Margaret Holloway. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a politician. She was listed as the founder of a nonprofit called Second Start Foundation, an organization that provided scholarships and housing assistance for young adults leaving the foster care system. Foster care. My stomach tightened. I clicked on the foundation's website. Margaret's biography described her as a retired attorney who had spent over 30 years advocating for children without permanent families. The more I read, the less any of it made sense. Why would Ethan be terrified of someone whose life's work was helping kids like him? That evening, he came home carrying my favorite takeout, Thai food. Usually that meant he was trying to celebrate something. This time, it felt like an apology. We ate quietly. Finally, he put his fork down. I know you're angry. I don't like being lied to. I know. So, tell me the truth. He looked at me for a long time. Then he quietly asked, Did you look her up? I didn't lie. Yes. What did you find? Her name. I paused. And her charity. His expression changed. Almost. Relieved. That's all? What else should I have found? He stood and walked to the kitchen window. I've spent 20 years hoping I'd never see her again. My heart started racing. You know her? Yes. How? He stayed silent. I walked over and stood beside him. Ethan, he swallowed. When I was 15. His voice barely came out. I stole from her. I blinked. What? He nodded once. I lived in a group home she volunteered at every weekend. He kept staring outside. She believed in me. More than anyone. What happened? I didn't think anyone ever stayed. His eyes filled with tears. So I pushed people away before they could leave. I reached for his hand. He let me hold it. One afternoon she asked if I'd like to apply for a private school scholarship. That sounds wonderful. It was. So, why are you afraid of her? He laughed bitterly. Because instead of thanking her, I stole $800 from her purse. I stared at him. He looked ashamed. I ran away that night. I thought she'd hate me forever. I didn't know what to say. $800 wasn't a small mistake, but it also didn't explain the panic I'd seen. Did she report you? No. You were arrested? No. Then what happened? I disappeared. He looked at me. I never saw her again. So you think she recognized you? I know she did. I sat quietly. Part of me expected that to be the end. It wasn't. There was something else. Of course there was. I lied. My stomach dropped. About what? I told you my parents died. I felt every muscle in my body go still. They didn't? No. He closed his eyes. My mother died when I was 8. My father. He struggled to continue. Gave up his parental rights because he couldn't care for me. He opened his wallet. Inside was an old photograph I'd never seen before. A little boy. A tired-looking man. I kept this hidden. Why? Because I was ashamed. I looked at the picture. You didn't lose your father. No. He abandoned you. A tear rolled down his cheek. I thought if you knew, you'd think less of me. I hugged him before I even realized I was moving. You were a child. I still stole from someone who was trying to help. He was right. He had, but shame had been carrying him for 2 decades. You should tell her. His head snapped toward me. What? Margaret. No. Why not? Because she'll remember exactly who I was. I smiled sadly. Maybe? Or maybe she'll remember who you've become. He didn't answer. 3 days later, I convinced him to come with me to the Second Start Foundation. The entire drive there, he barely spoke. His hands shook, just like they had at the gala. The receptionist smiled warmly. Do you have an appointment? No, Ethan admitted. But I think she might remember me. A few minutes later, Margaret stepped into the lobby. The moment she saw Ethan, her eyes widened. Neither of them spoke. Finally she smiled. I've wondered about you for 20 years. Ethan's voice broke. I'm so sorry. She walked closer. I stole from you. Yes. I lied. Yes. I ran away. Yes. He looked down. I don't deserve your forgiveness. The room became silent. Margaret reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a worn envelope. I hoped one day you'd come back. She handed it to him. Inside was a scholarship acceptance letter, dated 20 years earlier. His name was printed across the top. I never canceled it. He stared at the paper in disbelief. I kept thinking maybe you'd walk through my office door. His shoulders shook. You waited? I believed you were scared. She smiled gently. I never believed you were beyond saving. Ethan cried harder than I'd ever seen. So, you don't hate me? Hate you? She laughed softly through tears. I was worried you'd convinced yourself you weren't worth finding. Later that afternoon, the three of us sat together for coffee. Margaret listened as Ethan told her everything. College, his career, our marriage, every success he'd been too ashamed to believe he deserved. When we finally stood to leave, Margaret hugged him tightly. You can't rewrite your childhood. She smiled. But you can decide what kind of adult that little boy grows into. On the drive home, Ethan looked lighter, as if he'd finally put down a weight he'd carried his entire life. A few months later, he joined the board of the Second Start Foundation, not because he owed anyone, because he wanted other frightened kids to meet someone who believed in them before they believed in themselves. Watching him mentor teenagers who reminded him of his younger self changed the way I understood love. The biggest secret in my marriage wasn't another woman. It wasn't another family. It wasn't another life. It was a wounded 15-year-old boy who had spent 20 years believing one terrible mistake defined him forever. The real betrayal wasn't what Ethan had done to me. It was what shame had done to him. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't asking for forgiveness. It's believing they're finally worthy of receiving it.